An Israeli ground operation into Palestine's Gaza now seems almost inevitable.
במקביל אנחנו נערכים לכניסה קרקעית. אני לא אפרט מתי, איך, כמה.
Since the October the 7th Hamas attacks, there has been a massive build-up of troops around Israel's border with the besieged enclave. Israel mobilized its regular army and called up over 300,000 reservists. In the last 2 decades, Israel has mainly focused on aerial bombardment and artillery fire in Gaza, and it only launched 2 ground invasions because of the risks involved. Let's look back at previous Israeli wars on Gaza that involved ground operations. Israel's Operation Cast Lead in January 2009 involved a 15-day ground invasion. The Israeli army was met with fierce fighting and resistance as it pushed deeper into Gaza's urban areas. Israel's military was forced to fight from street to street and house to house, with many homes having been fitted with booby traps, and Israeli troops often having to dismantle improvised explosive devices. A continued ground operation risked more Palestinian civilian life and, for Israel, a greater loss of troops. Growing international criticism and domestic political pressure forced Israel to abort plans to continue fighting in densely populated urban areas. So Hamas and Israel agreed to a ceasefire on January the 18th, and by the 21st, the latter withdrew its army from Gaza. In the overall fighting, Israel claimed that it dealt a huge blow to Hamas, destroying much of its tunnel infrastructure. Israeli forces killed more than 1,400 Palestinians, the majority of whom were civilians. In Gaza, around 4,000 homes were destroyed, and the Israeli offensive caused $2 billion worth of damage. On the other side, Israel lost 10 soldiers and 3 Israelis were killed by rockets in regions bordering Gaza. Israel's biggest war and ground invasion came between June to August 2014. The ensuing 7-week war was one of the deadliest in the history of the Israel-Palestine conflict in decades. A full-scale ground invasion took place with heavy fighting in densely populated neighborhoods such as Shuja'iyya in Gaza City. This brutal invasion killed 2,100 Palestinians and 73 Israelis. Estimates at the time said rebuilding Gaza would cost between $4 to $6 billion over 20 years. Both sides claimed victory, with Israel saying it had severely weakened Hamas and Hamas saying it had repelled Israel from Gaza. Hamas used up 2/3 of its arsenal of 10,000 rockets, and the Israeli military destroyed at least 34 of its known tunnels. So ground invasions often come with great risks, this time even more so than previous ones. Military experts say that any ground operation would take months of house-to-house, block-to-block urban warfare. Given Gaza's size, vast underground tunnel network, and overall tenacity, a ground operation carries high risks for Israel. Such a ground operation would lead to massive civilian casualties, as well as big financial and manpower losses for the Israeli army. And the biggest fear is that Israel's ground operation would expand from Gaza and provoke a regional conflict. Hezbollah and Israel have already engaged in armed skirmishes on the Israel-Lebanon border, and this raises fears the Iranian-backed group would open a second front in Lebanon. Ultimately, with the future being very uncertain and the stakes so high, the world is carefully watching Israel's next move.